Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Once Upon a Time, as well as the series premiere of American Gods. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of those respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of Once Upon a Time, you can skip to what I had to say about the series premiere of American Gods. But the first thing we're going to talk about is Once Upon a Time, a very good episode where I finally, we as the audience finally get the answers I've been constantly asking, like, when are we going to get the Black Fairy's backstory? And we finally did. Side note, it's so interesting because I think I brought this up like a couple episodes back. I even left a comment and been like, oh yeah, like I was like, oh, the next episode is called the Black Fairy or something like that. And I thought, this episode was going to be that episode. But it's like, I think what had happened was I read, like, I was looking at that list of episodes. I think my eye was automatically drawn to that, and I just assumed it was the next one. But later on when I checked, I didn't see it. So I was like, oh, I must have been like tripping or something. Like, no, it's here. So nevertheless, as typically with the show, and that's the beauty of this show. It always does a good job of making you feel bad for the villains, because it's like every villain, more often than not, like I said, there have been some exceptions, but even with those exceptions, it's kind of like they're up. Well, like I said, like to me, like I brought it up before. To me, the ultimate like non-redeemable villain to me is probably Cruella de Vil, because her whole situation is her mom kind of kept her locked up because it's like her mom knew her proclivities, like knew what was kind of inside of her. So that's like the biggest one. Obviously, I brought up other examples, but even those other examples I brought up before, it's like when you actually think about it, it's kind of like maybe it's kind of like you're kind of destined to be like that. But nevertheless, it turns out, for one, she wasn't always a fairy. I was always wondering about that whole situation. I mean, like I brought up before, like, oh, apparently you can just leave your wings behind because Tiger Lily did. So I was like, oh, maybe she did that. She became a mom and then went back to being a fairy or something. It's like, no, she was originally not a fairy. She was a regular lady, and she gave birth to Rumple. Granted, at the time he didn't have the name Rumpelstiltskin, but it turns out the twist in the story is Rumple was actually born a savior. But the fact of the matter is, becoming a savior meant he was also given the savior's destiny as well. I mean, every land has its own savior. Obviously, Agrabah had Aladdin. The Enchanted Forest had what we thought was Emma, but it's actually Rumple. The reason why it became Emma, because obviously, as things played out throughout the episode, like I'll skip to it and just say it, but like when she snipped his destiny, the destiny passed on to someone else, and then passed on to Emma. So it's not even just Rumple's life that was turned upside down. It's also Emma's. Like Emma's life would be, as we saw kind of at the beginning of the at the end of during the winter finale, we kind of saw what her life would have been like if she kind of wasn't the savior. But that's what her life would have been, even more so, and it would have been kind of like how life was supposed to be. It's just like, it's so cool that like destiny works like that and stuff like that. It's like if you can no longer fulfill your destiny, it passes on to someone else. I mean, maybe at the same time you could argue maybe that's technically how it worked with Aladdin. At any given time, it seems like there could only be one savior at a time. So maybe it passed to Aladdin, but, with the time working differently in different worlds, obviously Emma came to this world and started aging, but maybe at the moment Aladdin snipped his destiny, the same thing happened to Emma. Like she gained the destiny. Maybe it went from Rumple to Aladdin to Emma, or maybe it went from Rumple to somebody else and eventually led to Aladdin, which eventually led to Emma. Or maybe it doesn't work like that. Maybe you have multiple saviors at the same time. Because now that makes two saviors that's had their destiny slipped. One by his own choice, but that's me diving too heavily into it. But basically, the destiny that Emma has now facing the ultimate evil. Basically, his mom, her name Fiona, which, like, because I was wondering, because I saw blue and I saw red fairy. I was like, wait a minute, does that make her the green fairy with the whole, like, the ones that, pop up in, like, from the Sleeping Beauty story? I've heard their names. I can never memorize them. But I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. Granted, in this story, like, she ends up using a spell to make herself into Yellow Fairy, because to her, it's like, that's the only way I can protect my son, because he's got this destiny. And it's like, I wish, what am I supposed to do? I'm on edge. I can't eat. I can't sleep, because I know my son's destiny. He's destined to die fighting against great evil. Essentially, it's an evil that's born with a crescent moon on it, like as a marking. And it's like, dude. So she became a fairy for the purposes of trying to save her son, but she was the Yellow Fairy. And I'm thinking maybe they did that specifically because, I mean, she's not a fairy, but she's a pixie, but maybe it's because it would have been confusing because Tinkerbell's green and everything with her. I don't remember if like her pixie dust is green or not. It's always yellow and stuff like that when it comes to the animated stuff. I don't remember if it's actually green in this. Obviously, like, but her attire is green, so I was like, maybe that's the reason why they made Fiona yellow, so it would be a little less confusing or something like that. Or maybe she's not actually one of the three fairies I'm thinking of. Obviously, this is the story doing its own thing too, because the fact of the matter is Tiger Lily, she was a fairy in this, so she was red instead of it being someone else. So, but nevertheless, everything she did was for the sake of her son, because like she tried taking every baby, but it turns out all these babies weren't with this crescent mark, and it's like, okay, like I have to find another way. This is how she ended up creating the curse, because the curse is meant to banish, like it will banish every child to a world without magic. And she's like, yeah, that's the whole purpose. That's the original purpose of the curse, to take her son to somewhere safe where he'd never have to be worried about magic again. I mean, that would also nullify the child that's supposed to be born to destroy him. But the fact is, Tiger Lily was like, I can't let you do that. Like, the fact of the matter is, you would be basically stripping him of his destiny. He's a great hero. He's supposed to bring light to this world. But at the same time, it's like, she's a mother. She's not willing to sacrifice her son for the sake of everyone else. Even if it means saving everyone else, it's still my son. He'd have to sacrifice his life for that. And like, I'm not willing to do that. And her willingness to do whatever it takes ended up making her into the Black Fairy. Because she ended up using the shears, because they're like, hey, we can use these shears and we can cut your power, make it so that you don't have to worry about being the one that destroys your son, that you ultimately have to fight each other. It's like, no, if we take away your powers, you never have to worry about it. But she's like, no. I have to keep my powers. I can cut his destiny. This way I can have the power to make sure nothing ever happens to him. And then in that moment, you're like, now we see where Rumple gets this whole situation of being so caught up on power. It's kind of a family trait. Like his mom's unwillingness to give up her power, even sacrificing his destiny to be a great hero, all for the sake of protecting him, which Rumple ends up bringing up. It's like, I became the Dark One for Bellfire's sake. And it's just like, it's like our family has this twisted cycle of being like, hey, trying to do the right thing, but we go about it the wrong way. We always do the bad thing for the right reason. So, I mean, I was actually surprised. I was thinking it was going to be Blue that outright told him the truth, but it's like, obviously Rumple had to find out for himself, because he used the sins of Morpheus to put him, Gideon, and Emma to sleep. Because like, last thing he wants is Emma going off being the hero. It's like, you banished her, defeat the Black Fairy. The fact of the matter is that puts Gideon's heart will be lost to us. So they're in a dream world, but it ends up being more so Rumple's dream, and he had to remember the secret himself, which Emma brings up the fact that, hey, we have very similar backgrounds, which Rumple's like, no, we're not. We're nothing alike. The fact of the matter is, your parents actually gave you a name. My mom never actually gave me a name. The name Rumple, actually, we find out later on, is from his dad, which his dad gave to him, because now we see a little bit about him and his dad's relationship too. The fact is, his dad resented him. It's like, Fiona's dead because of him. Like, she was always the caring, most kindest person, but she sacrificed so much to save him. And it's like, you're the reason why the woman that I love is gone. So you were supposed to bring light to our lives, but now you kind of taken that away. And it's like, he held that against him. It's like, he gave him a name that represented that. And it's like, dude, it's sad that Rumple had to take the brunt of it on both fronts. It's like, feeling like he was abandoned by his mother, to be almost resented by his dad. It's like, I mean, for Rumple too, it's like, I had this destiny. You made me into the person I am. Like, if you hadn't cut my destiny, I could have actually been a brave person. I could have been a hero, someone that Bellfire could have been proud of. The fact of the matter is, because all of that like trickled down and turned his life upside down, because if it wasn't for him ever becoming the Dark One, he never would have lost Bellfire. I mean, then again, at the same time, it's like, who knows, who's to say things would have worked out the way they did? Who's to say he wouldn't have eventually, I mean, I don't know, maybe Emma and Bellfire would have found their way to each other, and eventually, like, just like in that, whole, like, what if scenario, what if, like, she had never been chosen as a savior? So, maybe something like that would have still transpired, but I mean, you never know. Destiny's weird like that in the show. Really quick, kind of diverting away from that. In this particular, I wanted it, like, really quickly, since I'm on that subject, before I move on to, like, divert to another part of the episode. I'm very interested, like, did he ever find out the truth about her? Like, eventually he got magic of his own when he became Peter Pan, but maybe at that point it's kind of like, I don't care anymore. It's like, I left my son and all that behind. It's like, I'm Peter Pan now. I'm not the man I was before. So, but it makes you wonder, did he ever look into that to find out if she was really dead? I mean, he did have the power to kind of do it, but maybe at that point he never really cared enough. Like, it hasn't popped up yet. I'm still kind of waiting for that to happen. Maybe it never will happen, but like I said, like them meeting up again after all these years is like, oh, you're the Black Fairy now, and I'm, Peter Pan, especially, well, I'll go ahead and bring it up because rather than divert to the other part of the story I was going to go to. But at the end of it, obviously we have Rumple lying and like, yep, this is the Black Fairy's heart. And they're like, good job, Rumple. I knew you could do it. Good job, Savior. He's lying to everyone. He gave Gideon back his heart. He's lying to Belle. But he ends up telling Belle, like, I want you to know that going forward, any and everything I do know, no matter what it is for your sake. It's because I want to protect you guys. So it seems he's joined an alliance with the Black Fairy. Now, is this 100% willing? I don't know. Because the fact of the matter is, we know how she goes about doing the things that she does. This is all, she could have easily taken, like, Rumple's heart and forced his hand. Whether that's the case, I don't know. We also know that she does have control over his dagger, but I feel like they would have made a point to do that. But you never know. This might be setting up to be like, oh, Rumple's definitely a bad guy. Like, he decided to side with his mom willingly. I mean, we don't know what really 100% went down during that conversation. They did cut away from it and never cut back to it to tell us what exactly went down. Because Rumple was like, I mean, because, she's saying, like, oh, can you forgive me and everything? It's like, because now it's like, oh, we got to kill the Savior, too. Because the fact of the matter is, she's the last thing standing in the way of their family being reunited. She even said it herself. She said when the time came, Rumple would be willing to work with her. But then, like I said, this entire time we thought the same thing of Gideon, but like Gideon had his heart taken. And so it's like, maybe this is Rumple playing the long game. I don't know. Because on some level, he wants to keep his family together. And it's like, now knowing the truth about his mom, it's like everything she did was exactly the same thing as what he did for Bellfire. So he can't fault her for that. Because the conversation had came up like, Emma's like, you're not going to hold me. I will stop your mom, but it's like, you're not going to get my way. He's like, I won't shed a single tear when it's all said and done. But now knowing the truth, it does change things. Like, Emma always kept her parents at a distance. But then, eventually enough time passed. She ended up being like, I understand why they did what they did. They did what they did for my sake. Like, they wanted to protect me, but still, like, on some level she resented him. But it's like, and it's so interesting that prior to this, I never really thought about that 100%. It's like him and Emma have very similar lives. I mean, granted, it was like in their minds, Emma growing up, probably, thought the same thing. Her parents abandoned her. So same thing for Rumple, more so that like his mom left him and everything. So, but I mean, it'd be interesting going forward to see, like, I hope, like, you're still holding up because we know who Rumple is. Because even Belle's like, I knew it. Like, I always saw the man beneath the beast. I always knew it was good in you. And it's like, but even Rumple himself is confused. He's always been this darkness. He's always been the dark one. And now he's finding out, oh, I actually was a savior. There was light within me at one point. So I guess every time, because it always seemed like Blue was kind of always hard when it came to Rumple. It was just like the dark one and everything, looking at him like that. And I'm like, now I think I get why. Because now she looked at him before. It's like, within the context of the story, like, you were going to be everything that this world needed. You were going to be the light that fought through the darkness. But now that destiny was taken from you. And now, because of your mom, you've actually become the very evil that you're kind of supposed to stop. So in turn, it does turn out that she is the ultimate evil that he is supposed to fight. I was like, dude, I kept thinking like, oh, she couldn't be the ultimate evil. Like I said, we don't know. There's still some story to tell. So who knows if she is ultimately like in the context of a video game, who knows if she is the quote unquote final boss. There might, this might be a JRPG situation where it's like, oh yeah, like the final boss has like multiple tiers and multiple forms, and like there's a form that it'll take after she's defeated. I don't know. I mean, that also brings up the question too, who will be the one to stop her? Is it because of where he is right now? Will Rumple be the one to be able to stop her? Will he sacrifice himself to stop her? Like, or will Emma have to sacrifice herself? Or will Rumple sacrifice himself so to make sure that Emma doesn't have to? It's like doing the one good thing. Like, he's like, the thing that Bellfire will be proud of me of, the thing that Gideon can be proud of me of, and that Belle can be proud of me of, So, I mean, we would just kind of have to wait and see in that regard. So I'm hoping on everything that he did. Either this is some long con or she really is controlling, but I get the feeling like he went out of her way to talk about the fact is that he would willingly join her. So we'll see. on some deep level, he wants his entire family together. Which that whole story element makes me think maybe it'd be kind of interesting. Like I brought up before, it'd be interesting if Peter Pan would come back just to kind of complete the whole thing, and especially him being like, "Wait, you're alive? I thought you were dead. Look, Rumple, we're all evil. We're all bad guys. We can be together forever." I mean, that's definitely going to be interesting going forward with him looking like Peter Pan. I mean, to be fair, like Peter Pan isn't just like some random form. It's like it turned him back in the way he looked when he was younger. That's the whole reason why like Peter Pan is the way Peter Pan is. So, but another interesting side of this story is the fact is you have Zelina kind of deal with the fact is, okay, so I'm living life without magic and it sucks. And then Regina's like, yeah, I know. It's like you have to turn lights on by hand. It's like, I know, how barbaric is that? But it's like, hey, you get used to it. It's like I got used to it. I lived 28 years without, without magic. It's like you'll get used to it. So, but Zelina's like, I'm feeling useless and everything. It's just like, it's like, how am I supposed to protect Robin if I don't have magic? It's like, don't worry about that. The fact of the matter is, Regina's teaching her how to drive. And I just love it. It's just a little sister bonding moment that I really appreciate it. And, but Regina makes her promise. She's like, yeah, the final battle is coming. And the fact of the matter is, that will mean in a battle like that, there will be casualties. And she's like, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of this, but I want to make sure that Henry's not here. Because he'll try to do everything. He'll want to fight, but I don't want him caught up in this. What I want you to do instead is I want you to take him as far away from here as possible. Take him to New York. It's like, I'm honored that you would say, like, leave, up to me to raise Henry. She's like, no, he's there to help raise you. And it's just like, oh, it's such a beautiful sister moment, especially later on when Regina and the Black Fairy get into a duel and everything. And at that moment, Zelina shows up and hits her with the car. It's like, yeah. She's like, yeah, driving's not so easy when you're actually purposely trying to hit something. I'm like, ah. And along with this, we also have Henry being chosen as Killian's best man. I'm like, dude, he's like, whoa, like we've been on many adventures and everything together, especially what happened on Nautilus. It's like, that wasn't really on purpose. That was kind of an accident situation. It's like, nevertheless, we've been through a lot together. And so I'm choosing you to be my best man. It's like, so don't lose the reins because your mom would kill you. It's like, and it's like, wait, what? It's like, no, nothing. So it's just, oh, dude, it's coming together. Granted, at the same time, we have the other storyline. So obviously you have the good and the bad. Because obviously you have the good where everyone's like, oh, the Black Fairy's been dealt with. We can get on with the wedding. But obviously the Black Fairy has her plans to kill Emma. So very interested to see what goes down next episode. Do note, next episode, I made sure to remind myself. I saw a reminder of it too. So yay, reminders all around. That next week's episode is the musical. I'm very interested to see what goes down. Obviously, like I said, I'm very actually looking forward to it. Like I said, it's so interesting because it kind of makes sense that it would be, like, it feels like there should have been one before now, like I brought up before, Disney property and all that. So I'm very interested to see, like, obviously probably the wedding is going to be the big part of the musical. Like, everything's going to be leading up to the wedding. Probably get a situation where it's like you have everyone dancing and singing. Like, you'll probably do like the good side, bad guy side. It's like, oh, you have the good side having a musical, and maybe you also have the bad guys having a musical, make you bounce back and forth or something. I don't know. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna wait to be surprised to see what goes down in that musical episode. So we'll just have to see what goes down. What also big story elements are going to go down in the next episode with the wedding and trying to kill Emma and everything. So, and now moving on to the series premiere of American Gods. A very good and interesting series premiere. I will go ahead and let you know ahead of time. I've never actually read the book that the series is based on. Interesting thing though, I found this out like a while back when I was originally seeing the trailers pop up for the show, but I figured this is the best platform to break it up on. Is the fact is, I did not know that the dude who wrote this book, the book that this series is based on, Neil Gaiman, actually wrote like the Vertigo comic book series, The Sandman. He also wrote the Stardust book that the movie Stardust is an adaptation of, as well as I think it was Coraline too. I think it was a short story. I don't remember, but nevertheless, the movie Coraline he wrote. So it's like, dude, you got like a very interesting like work history. But nevertheless, so I'm not really 100% sure what mythology this is pulling from when it comes to the gods and everything. I know some mythology here and there. I know a little Greek. I know a very little minuscule amount of Norse. Because like when I originally watched this, like something that I even talked about this in the watch list I did for earlier this month. Last month, because by the time this goes up, it'll officially be May 1st. Especially considering the fact that I'm recording this like super early in the morning, and it is May 1st. Besides the point. What I find fascinating is that, like, it made me think of immediately of the Almighty Johnsons. If you've never watched the Almighty Johnsons, highly recommend you do that. Like, I've always labeled it as kind of, it's a very heavily God-centric, like, comedy show. It's like, oh yeah, what if humans became the reincarnation of, like, Norse gods and stuff like that, and, like, their daily lives dealing with it. Kind of the premise that I kind of got from this, but more like, it's like, obviously that's a more, I'd go as far as maybe saying a dark comedy. It has its comedy moments, has its drama moments, but nevertheless, it seemed like it's a much lighter show. But this, I had just from what I could get, it feels like this seems like it's going to be like a darker show. So that's immediately where my brain goes. And because there's certain thing, obviously, you had that little monologue thing at the beginning, which I really appreciate. There was like, I guess I would assume were Vikings went to that island. Literally, dude got filled with arrows. I was like, the arrows won't stop. You can't even see any part of his body anymore. There's so many freaking arrows inside of him. Basically, they were pleading to different gods. Like, they're trying to, like, hey, our sails messed up. There's no wind blowing. We need to fix this. So they try to, like, ask a god to help summon the wind. And they did an interesting thing where they all messed up. I think it was particularly their right eye. They all, like, cut and damaged their right eyes as a way to talk to him. And in particular, they used the term All-Father. Now, pulling from a little bit of Norse mythology, I know, as well as, you know, also from the Almighty Johnsons, I know that the All-Father is the name that they give Odin because it's like top dog, right? So that's what I'm kind of thinking, like, okay, is this show pulling from Norse mythology? I also saw the name Loki when I was kind of Googling around one time, kind of spoiled that for myself. So I'm thinking, yeah, it seems like it's heavily pulling from Norse mythology. Like I said, I know very, very little. Plus, it's been a while since I've seen the, Almighty Johnson, so I'm sure like a lot of its stuff, it's its own thing too. So, but nevertheless, because obviously we see him pop up later. I can only assume, we can all only assume that Mr. Wednesday, played by very talented Ian McShane. Dude, he's so good in this. I love him because he's like such an asshole. Even Shadow's like, yo, dude, I want to thank you because he's like, I'm hitting him with a drink. He's like, he's like, what? I'm offering you something to kind of quench your thirst, and you're looking at me like I had sex with your mother. He's like, no, I'm sorry. You're just like the first person I met that hasn't been told last to me. He's like, give me time. He also has the whole eye thing. That was another thing too. The eye thing, I think that's connected to a special thing Odin can see. Like when he covers one eye, he can kind of see everything. Like once again, that's pulling from my Almighty Johnson knowledge. But to me, that's what I'm kind of guessing because he even brings it up later on. He's like, the fact is that I can, I almost completely forgot about, I am slightly familiar with Thor because of the whole Thor movie. So I'm slightly familiar with Odin there. But he also had this thing about like, he can sleep anywhere, which is kind of like the fact is that the Odin can go into deep sleeps and stuff like that. I don't know what those necessarily represent because it's happened in like the Thor movies and stuff like that. But nevertheless, I need to stop doing that. Like, focus on this rather than like all this other stuff. Like, I can't help it. Like, I gotta accumulate my own knowledge a little bit. I know because I'm not going to Google things because I'm sure even Googling any mythology is like, well, that kind of spoils certain things. I'm sure a lot of this stuff is already established. Like, oh yeah, this is set in a world where all that like mythology stuff has already happened, and we're just kind of living in the aftermath of it. So, but nevertheless. He also says like a thing where it's like he can get whatever he wants on average. It usually works out in his favor. Granted, it usually takes a little time. So, I'm very like it's such an like just a lot of it's obviously set up. So we get introduced. I kind of went ahead, but like, obviously like we get introduced to Shadow, played by the actor Ricky Whittle. I best know him as Lincoln from the 100. That's once again beside the point. Shadow was in prison for like 5 years. I mean, he was sentenced to 6 years, but he only spent like 3 years because he basically aggravated assault and battery. I think it's kind of the whole beginning. It seems like it's trying to show that like Shadow kind of has a short temper, and basically gets out. But unfortunately, he learns at the time he's getting out, it's like, oh yeah, your wife Laura, yeah, she died in a car accident. It's like he was supposed to get out that Friday, but he's getting out a couple of days early, and now it's like, what was the point of getting out? Like, the whole point was like, hey, get to be back with my wife. Oh, she's dead. She died in a car accident. Then he has to make his way there. Then there's the whole airport situation, which I believe, I could be wrong, but I think the person, like, obviously he was friends with in prison. Like, it seems like his cellmate. I didn't catch his character's name, but obviously I think that's Jonathan Tucker, the actor. I really like him. He's like, do not start stuff with the ladies at the airport, because it's like, yo, there's this one dude, he went up there, started all this crap. It's like he tried to give his license, but it had expired, and it turned into a whole situation. It's like, yo, he was in the cell here in prison, he got respect. It's like, why can't I get it on the outside too? Started the whole thing, got his tail sent right back to jail, even though he had just got out after like a 5-year thing or whatever. And then he's like, so do you know what the moral of the story is? He's like, yeah, just because stuff works on the inside doesn't mean it works on the outside. He's like, no, stupid, don't mess with the ladies at the airport. Obviously not the word he used, but, you know, just so I can make this a little less, you know, because this is one of those things I'm most likely to cuss a little bit more. So I'm just kind of pull myself back a little bit from that. So, and then there's that whole situation at the bar. Like, obviously you have like Mr. Wednesday constantly offering, it's like, hey, I'll give you a job. I mean, obviously don't rush into anything, but constantly following him everywhere. And it's like, oh yeah, you thought you had a job and everything waiting for you. You do know that Robbie's dead too, right? Wait, what? Robbie being like his best friend or whatever. It's like, well, that sucks. And so Mr. Wednesday's offering him a job and everything. And it's basically like, hey, the job entails this. You work for me. You do whatever I ask you to do. You kind of essentially the way, I'm literally about to call him Lincoln. The way Shadow puts it, it's like, I'm basically, you know, he's Mr. Wednesday's errand boy. It's like, yeah, if someone needs to get their ass kicked, you kick it. And the fact of the matter is, like, you handle things on my behalf and stuff like that. So, like, to me, I was wondering, like, okay, so, cause I was wondering, is this going to turn into a whole situation where it's like, yo, Shadow, is he like the police officer amongst the gods? Is he there to kind of keep stuff in a row? I mean, more so than anything, it seems like he's obviously working more so on Wednesday's behalf, but it's like, is he there to kind of act as security to be like, keep the gods in line or something like that? I don't know. Like, that's what I initially thought. I mean, like I said, this is the first episode. Like, I know nothing about it, so obviously we just have to wait till later on to see how everything plays out. But he ends up running into a leprechaun named Mad Sweeney, and he's like, aren't you tall to be a leprechaun? He's like, that's a stereotype. And the fact is that he wanted, like, obviously he kept trying to warn him. He's like, do you know who he really is? Don't listen to him. He's a liar. He's a cheater. He's a swindler. And Mr. Winston's like, yeah, I'm all those things. So basically kept doing those coin tricks. I appreciate Mads doing his, like, the fact of the matter is he drops a gold coin and boom, boom, gold coins everywhere. It's like, I get it. At first I didn't really get it. And then I was like, right, the whole leprechaun thing. He's like, so how are you doing that trick? It's like, it's easy. I don't have to worry about putting on, I say it's easy when I can just like pop them in and out just like that. But he starts a fight with, Shadow, and I don't know why. I guess it's just like he needs a fight or something to prove. I don't know what it is. Like, I guess it's naturally in his blood. Like, basically, again, during the fight, he's like, do you feel that, Shadow? Do you feel that joy boiling up? And it's like, we're not done until I get to feel that too. So it's like, I guess he has a need to feel that, which makes me wonder too, does this mean we're also going to come across other mythical creatures in this? Because I thought it was going to 100% focus on like, yo, gods are here on Earth doing whatever the hell they want to, and it's like, I thought that was just the basic premise, but it's like, are there other supernatural things in this? Because like, normally it's some things I'll go into, like, you use an example like, Preacher. I went into Preacher knowing a little bit about the premise. This, I went into it knowing nothing at all. Like, I just, pulling from the little bit I saw, like, the teaser trailer, because I never saw, like, the official trailer for it. I just saw like the teaser trailer that came out a long time ago. Like, I think it came out in Comic-Con, but that's like the only thing I've ever seen, and everything I know I just pulled from that. There's all these imageries and stuff like that. Like, obviously when he was dreaming, like, he saw the ceiling open up and he saw his wife and he's like, oh, I love you. So it's like, obviously take that as a dream, but obviously maybe it means more. There's even one point, like, he keeps popping up in those woods, and at one point when the trees attacks him, don't know what that's about. Then at one point he sees a buffalo or maybe a bison. No, I think it is definitely a buffalo, but it like had like red burning, like literally fire coming out of its eyes. It's like, okay, what does any of that mean? Basically the terms, like, I know I'm bouncing all over the place, but it's just like, there's so much. Okay, for one, Shadow made an agreement to his deal. He's like, I will work for you for a set amount of money this week, for per week. The fact of the matter is, I don't fight people for fun or for profit. That's what he said. Like, the fact of the matter is, if someone tries to hurt you, I'll fight them then, but other than that, I won't be fighting for fun and profit and stuff like that. Like I say, it seems like that's all trying to circulate the fact is that he does kind of have that inside of him, like that need, that joy from fighting. And obviously they went through that trouble saying like, oh, those Vikings at the beginning had to like fight like it's like, oh, they went trying to aim for the All-Fighter, who they should have been aiming for is their god, the god of war. So I'm wondering, is that who Shadow's supposed to be? Because I'm thinking Shadow's going into this being a regular human, but I'm thinking like Odin's coming to him to be like, yo, I think you had the potential to become a god. Like I see something inside of you. You could be my new god of war. Like I don't know how this whole situation works. Like maybe the original god of war is dead. Maybe he's not, so maybe they're trying to maybe Link did it again. Maybe Shadow's about to become like in the processes of becoming a god, because it seems like this is God's affairs, and it's like, how is a human going to just handle this? Like, not unless he's always been one, but he's just never come into his powers until now. But very interested to find out like what Mr. Wednesday wants with him, what this is all about. I did like afterwards, after the bar fight and everything, he woke up. He's like, "Did he ever teach me that trick of his?" Is like, "Oh yeah, I actually think he did." So he's also said this thing where he's like, "I'm telling you this one time and one time only. Take as much time as you need." I guess it's a situation where it's like he always kept telling him the entire time, is like, don't rush into anything, So I guess that's going to be a running theme throughout the episode. I mean, not the episode, the entire series, but God, like that's just obviously the God stuff. But it's like let's scale it back a little bit and talk about just his personal life. Come to find out, obviously, he ends up finding out it's not just his wife that died, his best friend Robbie died. Obviously, I brought that up earlier. But interesting enough, he learns from Robbie's wife, Audrey. It's like, oh, you didn't know? Yeah, she died with my husband's dick in her mouth. It's like, what? It's like you were all excited about coming home to your wife, and you find out that she. Side note, interesting fact, I didn't realize she was in the show, is Emily Browning, one of the kids from the Series of Unfortunate Events movie. That's the big thing that I know her from. But it's like, holy crap. And then later on, Audrey's talking about, she's like at the funeral and everything. It's like she ended up pissing on her husband's grave because she's like super drunk and just pissed and everything. It's like, holy crap. It's like, yeah, like apparently like because of the crash, his dick ended up getting cut off. And she's like, you know what they asked me? They asked the dude that did the autopsy and everything. It's like, do you know what he asked me? What did I want him to do with it? And then like you had to see that look on Shadow's face. She's like, don't worry, she didn't die with his junk in her throat. It's like, oh god, this is a conversation that's happening. And it's like, man, that's rough after everything you've been through. And then just for that, it's just like he even brings it up. It's like, I want to get smart. I want to be a better person after I came out, and I come out to find about this, and I can't do anything about it because you're gone. So I can't be pissed about it. He's like, if you want to leave, you should have just told me. I would have been okay with it. I would have been fine. And at least have and the way Audrey talks about it, it's like, was it like, he was asking like, is it a recent thing or like a long time? She's like, it might have been a long time, because she's like putting things together, like the work hours, the like showers in the middle of the day and stuff like that. She was just like, okay, so now basically let's get payback in front of him. I want him to see that obviously, like, Shadow's like, I'm not going to do that. You're hurting and stuff like that. That'd be taking advantage of the situation. But there was a moment where Shadow had flipped the gold coin. It starts flipping. What that represents, I don't know. And then it lands in the dirt, but later on the dirt kind of sucks in. And so I was wondering, I was like, I mean, obviously you see her name in the titles and stuff like that, which I skipped over. Awesome title open, like a title card screen opening, whatever you want to call that. It heavily I wonder, is it the same person who does it? But it heavily reminds me of like the Netflix shows, like the Marvel Netflix shows, like your Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, as well as Iron Fist. Like it's got that. I mean, amongst them, like Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist kind of have aesthetically the same one. Obviously, like Jessica Jones being the different one. Like I've mentioned before, if you don't know, Jessica Jones like opening credit thing, it's like my favorite one. I just aesthetically like how it looks. But it kind of heavily reminded me of the other three. So I wonder if it's the same person who did that. Maybe not. But nonetheless, it's like it seems like she's a main character in it. So I was like, not unless a lot of her story is told through flashbacks or something like that, or him just like thinking about her and she pops up in the story that way. But it seems like the whole gold coin situation is like, yeah, we're going to bring her back. And it's like, what does that mean in this world, a world of gods and stuff like that? What that necessarily means? I don't know. Maybe it's a situation where she kind of comes back as a zombie. It's like, yeah, I'm technically undead or something like that. Like I'm, might even come back without a soul. It seemed like it might be one of those type of ordeals anyway, and then there's the interesting, there's so many other things too. There was that, goddess, Billiquist. She's like hooking up with that dude, and she's like pray to me, worship me. He's like, the fact of the matter is, you're like, what was it? He called her the queen of all beauty. She's on a throne of honey or something like that. And she proceeded to pull him into her body through her vagina. Like I said, what is this show? I love being like, wait, what? What that's all about, I guess we'll find out soon enough. But it was just kind of, I guess, just introducing that character. It's like, yeah, we have this goddess who's just kind of like, it seems like a situation where she gets men to worship her and then she devours them. It's like, that's how, I don't know whether the situation where it's like, oh, that's how she keeps her beauty and stuff like that, by devouring those who worship her. I mean, I'm sure every god's got its own thing about people who worship them. Like, I mean, maybe that's how they get their power. I mean, obviously, but there's a kind of leading into that. It's a whole conversation that basically while he's out in the field, there's like some machine or something that latches on to Shadow's face, and he enters kind of almost like a virtual reality thing. Like aesthetically, it kind of reminded me, if you've ever played the game Super Hot, it kind of reminds me of that kind of aesthetic. And then he was just like, okay, what's going on here? And the things beside him, the guy never catch his name. It's like, yeah, this is, yeah, you tell me the truth, kind of keep your answer short and simple, or the children there will kill you, while he's smoking on Toad's skin. But he started asking all these questions about Mr. Wednesday. Like, because I know he's possibly in the show, I want to say the dude, because of the red and everything, I think that's Loki. Because even like, there was even a remark from Mr. Wednesday being like, oh yeah, he's like, what, like, Shadow's like, what happened to my car? Mr. Wednesday's like, oh yeah, I had to get rid of it. It's like, red's not your color. It's like, is that you making a jab at Loki? Because I associate Loki with red just because I think because of the Almighty Johnsons. I assume that's Loki, but I could be 100% wrong. Now, that conversation started making me thinking, like, the way he's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is, oh, Mr. Wednesday's time is done. Like, you know, he's all up in it, like, this worship in the old ways and stuff like that. That's not how you do it. Like, obviously, this is the new age. So I'm like, so this seems like it's turning into, like, a old god versus new gods type of situation where it's like, he's like the young bloke. He's like, I'm coming into this. we need to change things up. We need to, like, he's so archaic about his approach. It's kind of like what I get the feeling about Mr. Wednesday. It's like, Mr. Wednesday's time is up. This is all about, us taking, like, either him in particular or, like, younger gods to kind of, like, take the reins. It's like, he's had the throne for too long. It's our time now, essentially. So that's what I'm pulling from it. So it'd be kind of interesting if that is the premise to this, because I've always thought that'd be an interesting thing, like the old gods versus the new gods. And that seems like where Mr. Wednesday comes into, like, yo, you need to back me up. I need I need muscle around, essentially. I'm wondering, does that include Mads, or is Mads just kind of his own thing? The fact is he knows so much about Mr. Wednesday makes me think, like, he's got some, like, connection. It seems like maybe that's why he was fighting Shadow 2, to kind of test his merits. Like, okay, if you're going to be a part of this job, you need to fight. Like I said, it seems like he might also have that innate need to fight too, just something in his blood. Maybe it's just being a leprechaun. I don't know. Honestly, I'm not that well versed in leprechaun mythology. My limit to leprechauns is the Lucky Charms leprechaun, as well as the leprechaun from the Leprechaun movies. If you've never, the horror leprechaun movies. So that's as far as my leprechaun knowledge really goes. So. But at the end of the episode, like, obviously he sends his children to go beat the crap out of Shadow. I haven't even talked about that. I completely, like, skipped over. The fact is, that's another thing about the show. This seems like it's definitely going to be one of those super bloody shows. It seemed like some god... I can't believe I didn't even jump to that, too. I think the reason why is because that's Greek mythology, and I guess that's why I didn't just immediately go there. God of War. I don't know why I didn't pull that reference, too, but I think that has to be why, just because it's Greek mythology, and I'm kind of leaning towards a thought that this is based on Norse mythology. Not unless this is a situation where it's like... depending on where you go, like, go at different things, like... A lot of mythologies, like, especially when the people take their own interpretation of it, it's like, oh yeah, you think I'm, like, a good example is the show Supernatural, like, one of the, I forgot what his actual name is. There's actually an angel, but was it Gabriel? I think it might have been Gabriel. He always went around pretending to be Loki, the god of tricksters, but he also is Gabriel. So it's like, maybe it's a situation like that, where it's like, one mythology has, like, Odin named this, but in another, he's named that. Like, maybe in all mythology is right. They just go by different names depending on who's worshiping them, type of thing. I don't know. But at the very end, we see, like, people getting, like, all those children getting dismembered. We don't see by who. I assume, could be wrong, but I would assume maybe it's, like, have something to do with that whole Laura's grave situation. Once again, just pulling that out of nowhere, but it's like, I'm very excited about the show. The show's already gripped me. I'm like, dude, like, you've already set up so much, and I'm like, I'm wondering what everything means. I'm like, I'm very interested to find out what the world of gods like means in this day and age. What is Mr. Wednesday's plan like? You know, that's got other people being like, even them asking like, what the hell is he planning? He is a trickster. He is a sharp liar. He is a liar and a cheater. So it's like, I don't know. And like I said, what does Shadow have to do all of this? Like, is Shadow just naturally human, or is there a lot more to him than that? I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Like, especially with this lore development too, I'm kind of interested. Like, what does that mean going forward? Especially for Audrey, when it's like, yeah, my cheating sack of crap husband is dead, but my best friend who cheated on her husband with my bastard of a man. Like, what does that mean for them going forward? If that turns out to be the case, if she is brought back, I mean, we will just have to wait and see. I mean, I'm very excited to see where all this goes. So. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.